Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Staci, and today the two films we're talking about both involve people living out in the woods, which on the one hand, I kind of admire, but on the other hand, for both these cases, I'm like, yeah, but there are certain modern day things that I actually really like, heating and air, or even just actual real four walls and a ceiling around me to keep the cold wind out. And I'm just like, I'm all for somewhat of a back to nature sort of mindset, but everything in moderation, I guess. So the first film is Leave No Trace. And this film's quite interesting in that I literally saw no promotional material for it whatsoever. It just one day showed up at my theater, the theater I've been going to lately, and I'm just like, what is that? Is that a documentary? I have no clue what this is whatsoever. It's got the little, I want to call them they're not thought bubbles, but they're little quotes with these things around them that clearly shows, aha, this has been somewhere on the festival circuit because it's, won awards at Cannes or something. It's got a certain look to it that you often see on more indie films. Is like, you won something at some independent film festival thing. Okay, I kind of already get a sense of what type of film you are, even if I don't know what you're about. So I was like, okay, so it's indie, probably smaller. That would explain why I hadn't heard too much about it. But even for smaller indie things, I had at least seen some trailers for some of the other films. And this one I was like, nothing whatsoever. And then it just has my theater that I go to puts up, they're not even posters, they're on digital screens to show what's playing in each theater so people don't get confused. And I happened to see it as I was walking to a different showing, and I'm like, what's that? It's in the woods. I don't know what this is. Have to look it up. So in looking it up, found out that it's about a father and daughter who are living in the woods and then get found out and taken by social services or whatever, and having to deal with that. And I'm like, okay, that seems kind of interesting. I'd be interested to see that. So this actually has Ben Foster, who I believe is from Breaking Bad. I did not watch that show. He plays the father. And since my sense of timing is off, there's a part of me that I'm like, are you actually old enough to be her father? Because she's clearly a teenager. And I just somehow think you're still in your mid 30s. So you would have become her father at a very early age, but okay. He is some form of the military veteran who very clearly suffers with PTSD, and that's why he's chosen to live out they're in the middle of a nature reserve or park near Portland, Oregon. So they're technically in the woods, but they can walk into Portland to get supplies if they ever wanted to. But it's nature. It's a government land, so they're not supposed to be living there. His character's name is evidently Will, but I'm not sure it's ever said in the film. He's just constantly Dad in my head because he plays the father of Tom, who is played by, I'm going to pronounce this, Thomasin McKenzie. And I'm not sure, this is based off of a book, and I'm not sure if that's the character's name in the book or if we just gave it that name because the actor's name is Thomasin. There's also Dale Dickey in this, who was in Winter's Bone, and the director of this, Deborah Granick, directed Winter's Bone, and Dale Dickey's character is also named Dale. So there's a couple of people I'm like, so you're just going by your real name, but Okay, whatever. Moving on. So Dad and Tom are living out in the woods, completely off the grid. They have no power. They don't even have walls. They live in a... I apologize for the dogs barking. They live in a tent, but then they have a sort of campsite near the tent somewhat that just has like a tarp over it and no walls. And again, this is in Portland, Oregon. So the whole film is in the woods, which the opening shots are beautiful. You see them just sort of walking through the woods and nothing around them. I'm like, that's gorgeous. But on the other hand, it looks like you have a very good chance to constantly be wet and or cold. Why? Like, okay. We don't get too much of the backstory of how they came to be in the woods. We just start with them there. So it's not clear how long they've been doing this. If Dad took Tom out into the woods when she was like a baby, or if he took her out into the woods when she was a certain age of a child. We don't know. I think her mother's dead, but we only kind of get mentions of her. So it's like, okay, you've been living in the woods for a while, and we start there, but Tom clearly doesn't really know how to act in society. She doesn't appear to ever have been put into school. She's very shy around strangers. She's sitting on a ledge or something, reading a book, and doesn't happen to notice that a jogger has paused shortly below her until she kind of sees him out the corner of her eyes, and then she quickly ducks down, but in doing so makes some noise and draws the jogger's attention. And he later reports, hey, I think, there was someone in the woods. So the cops come with a dog to sniff them out and ends up catching them. And so they get taken in and then have to deal with a social worker who's trying to, reintegrate them back into society. They first get put onto I think it's a Christmas tree farm. It's a guy who owns a Christmas tree farm and also has a stable with animals for some reason. I'm not quite sure, because everything having to do with the Christmas tree farm is like very much mechanized. There's this mechanical thing that they put the trees through to put them into nets. The trees are brought to the place wherever this processing of the trees happens by helicopter. They're cut down by this very interesting looking rounded sort of buzzsaw that clearly looks to be made almost specifically for this task, or for something like this where you'd be cutting down a lot of trees or whatever often. So it's like, okay, I get why the idea of the social worker would think, oh, this is great. These are people who've been living out in the woods for however long time. So put them in a place with a lot of trees, they'll be fine. Except this is not really nature. This is a Christmas tree farm. These trees are clearly in lines. And we see that Dad really kind of, he tries to make a go of it, especially for Tom, but he has a hard time because of his PTSD, especially it seems with the helicopter noise of bringing back not great thoughts. So they decide, maybe we can't stay there, even though Tom has actually been starting to adjust pretty well. She's made a friend of a sort who lives a bit down the road. She came upon his rabbit as it was just hopping along the road. He tells her about 4-H, which is where Future Farmers of America or something like that. And that gets her interested because, again, nature and animals. She's actually kind of starting to feel pretty okay about their situation, and Dad is very much not. And so he convinces her, yeah, this isn't for us. This is not where we're like, we don't need all this stuff. We've never needed all this stuff. They want to change us. So they leave, but they can't go back to their old site because it's been trashed, and people, the authorities would certainly know where to come get them. So they go up into Washington. And because this is not where they're used to, and we're given the sort of throwaway line of, oh, it's a higher altitude, that's why it's colder, this doesn't go as well as they plan. And you start seeing this friction coming between Dad and Tom over what we should be doing with our lives. Is it okay to live in society? Did we leave society for a reason? She's still, it seems, not 18, still certainly a minor. So he's still her legal guardian. but she wants to do things that he doesn't want to do. And you start seeing this friction of, well, what do we do? How do we go forward from this? I really liked this film, certainly. I kind of felt I probably would, just because, again, the idea of people living off the grid, even if there's a part of me that I'm like, I like the fact that humanity has come enough to the point that my shelter feels pretty much secure and able to keep me, at least dry and somewhat warm and not completely exposed to the elements, unless there was like a major catastrophic weather emergency or something. I don't know. While I am so very much like, yeah, I don't need all this technological stuff or just all these things in general, there's certain modern day comforts that I'm like, but I still want to have. But I still want to, not be cold at night. I still want to be sleeping on not the ground. Like, I still want to, there's, in one of the very early scenes, when they're about to go to sleep in their tent, they've got the tent zipped up and they have to bang books together because there are dogs like sniffing around and barking at the tent. And so they're banging the books, I guess, to try and shoo them away. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't want to have to worry about any animals randomly coming across me as I sleep. Just, yeah, pass. Hard pass. But so anyways, we do see them later when they get to Washington. Some things happen. They eventually come to Dale, and I think Dale is running or owns or is involved in somehow a like trailer community. She seems kind of in charge of it, and she lets them stay in a trailer for a while. But she's still not off the grid, I won't say, in tune enough with people who would choose to live like them. There's a mention of a man in the woods that she sometimes leaves food for and is clearly okay with. She hasn't seen him in years, but she knows he's still alive because the food keeps getting taken. But she's clearly somewhat understanding of their situation, even if it's not the way she herself would choose to live. When they come to her, she wants to call the emergency services, is convinced not to, instead calls a friend who is a former Marine medic, and so therefore can deal with Dad both being physically injured, but also understanding a bit of the PTSD and why that would be driving him to do what he does. I do so like the side characters in this film a lot, just because so many of them are actually really decent people. And I don't mean that as cynical as it sounds, but it does kind of feel like when I went into it, I was like, two people living off the grid and trying someone's going to take advantage of you. But you see a number of times, both the social worker and people they come across as they're, trying to not stay in society, repeatedly ask Tom, if she's okay. And they try and talk to her off the side to make sure she doesn't feel like influenced by, they don't quite know he's her father at the time. So at one point they asked to hitchhike a ride with a guy, and he asked to speak to Tom alone. Is like, if you're in any trouble, tell me now, assuming that the guy she's traveling with is not necessarily treating her well, doesn't know it's her father, thinks maybe this is some sort of abusive domestic situation. And I just loved the fact that everyone was so much like, I am totally willing to help this person, both a hitchhike, but also if they're actually in trouble, and not anyone ever trying to take advantage of the situation. I don't know how realistic that is. Again, I kind of was a bit cynical about that. I totally expected someone to take advantage of their situation, and no one really does, even though you do get a number of guys who possibly would be in a setting to do so. And I was just like, thank you, human beings, for being decent. Thank you very much. I also thought it was very interesting. You do get some other people who are also homeless and or living off the grid, especially at the beginning in the park. There's something about Dad, and he gets PTSD drugs or something, but then sells them to another vet who it seems has been cut off for some reason. That's not specifically spelled out, but you do get the hints of it. And you kind of do get this sort of not direct commentary, but there is a bit of an underlying commentary about the treatment of people like Dad and Tom and like the other people living in the park. when they first get found out and taken by the authorities, they are dealing with their social worker, who at first splits them up to try and get the full story, because again, everyone's immediately like, we have to be careful. There may be some dangerous stuff going on here. We want to make sure Tom is not being abused. So we're going to talk to them separately so that he can't influence her. Love that they do that. Get especially why the social worker would do it. But then the social worker says this line where, you know, trying to show that she's understanding of Tom. She's like, it's not a crime to be unhoused, but you're not allowed to live on public land. And I'm just like, okay, but did you realize how ironic what you just said is? It's like, not a crime to be unhoused. It's if not acceptable, understandable or something, but you're not allowed to live on, where are they supposed to live if they're not living on public land? Like, can't live on private land. Obviously, that would be trespassing. So there isn't exactly like set away, you know, oh, unhoused homeless people can live here in land. I'm sure there probably is somewhere, but that's not like in the same way there are national parks kind of all over the country. And so you totally know what a national park is. There isn't a total unhoused park or whatever that the government sets up and runs out in just random land. So I'm just like, where are they supposed to live if they're allowed to be unhoused but can't stay on public land? I don't know that you get how ironic that statement was, but I get it, and I can clearly see the film is trying to make a statement here. I totally can understand why the director of Winter's Bone would also choose to direct this film. It feels quite a bit like that, where you have this young girl in this definitely not, I want to say not civilized society, but not in the like everyday civilized society that most of us think of, being placed into certain situations and trying to make the best of it, dealing with things that are perhaps a bit more than this however old teenage girl should deal with. And like in Winter's Bone, which basically, you know, sort of catapulted Jennifer Lawrence to stardom because she gave such a good performance, this film, Thomasin McKenzie, also giving a really good performance. Ben Foster as the dad is also pretty good, but because his character has PTSD, his performance at times is a bit more, if not showy, a bit more overstated. Or rather, Mackenzie's performance is definitely a bit more understated. And so she has to do more because her character doesn't display things as much as dad does, but also she's the main character. So she has to carry the film, and if she doesn't do it well, the film doesn't work well, and the film actually really does work really well. I will not at all be surprised if come awards season, this film gets some nominations. I won't at all be surprised if come awards season, Thomasin McKenzie gets some nominations and goes on to have a very similar career track as Jennifer Lawrence. None of that would surprise me. I thought this was a great film overall. Very good to watch. So we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Movie Podcast. Our second film today, and it's back to the land, back to nature, off the grid, however you want to call it, episode is Into the Wild. This is based off of the real life story of Chris McCandless, who graduated college, essentially gave away all his money, spent a few years tramping around the country before ultimately heading up to Alaska, where he ended up dying in a bus. He wasn't killed, he ended up dying, and the story definitely gets there. The film jumps back and forth in time, and that can be a little confusing. We start with the part with him in Alaska, though. You don't see his face at first until like after the title comes out, but you do get this sort of writing script that comes across the screen. He's writing to Wayne, which I believe is Vince Vaughn's character, though I don't remember the name ever being said. So I'm just like, who the heck is Wayne? Even at the end of the film, I'm like, wait, who was he writing to? Who was Wayne? This is based a lot off of a nonfiction book that was written about McCandless that was sort of the extending of an article the author had written for, I believe it was either Outsider or the New Yorker, about this story, because it was very interesting, of this guy who was like, you know what? Modern day life is a problem. He even at one point says that jobs are an invention of the 20th century. And McCandless, if you take, this film to be a pretty true portrayal of the real life person, he definitely seems to have thought of himself a bit sort of poetic and Thoreau-esque. He graduated from Emory University, and he evidently had good enough grades, he says at one point, to get into Harvard Law. But these were also grades in things like, courses on apartheid in South Africa and just much more social things. And he clearly was thinking about it and didn't think that the modern day world was the way we as human beings should live, and so decided not to do that. He gives away the majority of his money and then later burns the rest and his social security card. He cuts up like all his bank cards and IDs. He doesn't tell his parents or his sister where he's going. He just goes off. And this is taking place in the early 90s. So there aren't like cell phones or email or any sort of technological way to very easily keep track of where someone is. It's just like his parents have no clue where he is the whole time. He didn't tell them. He doesn't even write them letters. He doesn't call. And there's a scene at one point where he's thinking about calling, and if he wanted to do so, he'd have to do it over a payphone. And it's just like, you do get a number of times with the characters he meets along the road sort of being like, okay, but your parents, but your family, shouldn't you at least tell them where you are? Do they know where you are? Do they know you're okay? Like, what did you think about that? And that was definitely one of the thoughts I had the whole time. I was like, okay, but even if you don't like your parents, and we do get there's a bit of a voiceover from him. He's played by Emile Hirsch. And then there's a bit of a voiceover from his sister, who's played by Jenna Malone, sort of explaining different things about him and why he would have done this, including that they both didn't really seem to like their parents, that their parents had this whole problematic history where it turns out they weren't actually legally married, though at one point they had been talking to the kids about we might get divorced, that his father was possibly abusive, that both parents were sort of more focused on the material trappings of success and not necessarily the most loving, caring parents. At the same time, I'm still like, yeah, but if nothing else, your sister? Like, you and your sister seem to clearly understand and relate to each other quite well. Wouldn't you at least give her some notion of, if not where you are, where you're going, at least that you're alive? Like, it never once occurs to you to write her a letter under a false name or call at a time when you know your parents are likely to be out the house. It's just like, that seems a little, And it's very almost, there's a number of things that I'm not sure the filmmaker is meant to be ironic, but that feel ironic in this film. Because you trace McCandless from essentially the graduating from Emory College and him realizing, oh, my parents expect me to go off into this future and that's not what I want, so let me go tramp around. he comes across a number of different people. There's a couple, Jan and Rainey. They're really hippies. They're traveling around in like a trailer painted with peace signs and the rainbow, and then they camp out at this, I don't even know what to call it, hippie trailer camp later in the film, where we also get Kristen Stewart's character, who's like a young folk singer. There's an old man who was a military veteran and his family was killed, and then he was an alcoholic, and he gets a lot of help during this film. He meets a lot of interesting people, and they all really seem to like him, and they all sort of help him along, if not financially. There's one couple that are from Copenhagen and very clearly comfortable with nudity, who tell him how to get into Mexico by traveling down the river. So he does that. And I'm just like, for someone who at one point does essentially say that, you know, human relationships are pointless, you benefit so much from human relationships. I'm just like, really? In 2 years, you didn't recognize at all how lucky you were, irregardless of coming from what seems to be a pretty decent background, and certainly, you know, a well-off one financially enough to the point that he can go to Emory and he has $24,000 in like 1990 in his bank account, and his parents want to buy him a new car when he graduates. I'm like, okay, so you're pretty well off. You're not suffering there, but human relationships are worthless. Just like, I feel that the filmmaker and or the writer want me to, like, if not relate to McCandless, at least sort of almost romanticize him, that he had this great idea that even though it didn't end well, he was at least living, you know, according to his true values and looking at the important things in life. But on the other hand, I'm like, for someone who's actually kind of smart, and he is, like, when he gets to Alaska, he creates a whole plan of how to survive involving creating hunting trails and all that. I'm just like, you actually seem quite smart and capable at times, and at other times you seem kind of idiotic. And I feel you essentially end up dead from your own, if not, you know, unplanning foolishness, because there's something that happens involving a river that I won't get into. And I'm just like, I'm almost angry with McCandless and with this film, just because I can totally see how people would look at it and think, yes, that's exactly it. Thoreau and all those other people were right. We need to get back to nature. And like, the film starts even before anything else happens with a quote from Lord Byron, which is a pretty famous quote because I recognized the end line, which is, it's not that I loved man the less, but nature more. And I'm like, yes, I've heard that. And all those, oh, man was really meant to live in nature people. I get why they would, you know, think that that's the total truth of being. But on the other hand, I'm just like, you just really went off into extreme. Like, if you wanted to live, you know, according to these true values and not according to material things, there was a way to do that without, you know, cutting yourself off from everybody else. Because, as you see, both in this film and in the previous one, Leave No Trace, when you're out in nature by yourself, you know, miles from anyone else, if something bad happens, you're on your own and you're essentially screwed. There's no one around to help you or even know that you're in trouble. That just seems horrible planning. And we do see later from McCandless that can be very lonely. Like, more than anything else, human beings do seem to be at least somewhat social creatures. And even if you disagree that humans need other people to get along in life, this idea that, oh, I can do it without needing anything else. I'm like, yeah, but dude, you're getting a lot of help this whole time as you're traveling around, even though you're trying to do it without having to do anything society. It's like, okay, fine. So you burned all your money, but the food that people are giving you was bought somehow, and their ability to drive you to your next destination or whatever was also paid for somehow. Like, when he's first tramping along, he at one point goes to shave and sort of shower under a, I don't even know what to call it, like a farm sprinkler. It's clearly some sort of farm plant, row crop sort of thing. And there are these tall sprinklers that are on wheels so they can be moved along the patch. Can you tell? I've never been on a farm. But clearly, so he's going and he's shaving in this, and I'm like, okay, yeah. So you're like, oh, it's out in the free and I'm not paying for it. I'm like, but it's a farm and that's a piece of machinery. Someone's paying for it. And then when he gets to Alaska, he has a rifle, and I'm like, so that got bought, because more than anything else, that especially neither you nor probably anyone you've ever met could like make from scratch. So you can't actually do this without some part of society existing. If all the rest of society never existed, you wouldn't survive. And this idea that you can do without society just frustrates me. And I'm just like, I feel so bad for his mother, especially. And I think you're meant to feel bad for his mother, especially when you get to the Catherine Keener character, who has herself a son who's out somewhere tramping along, and she hasn't heard from him in years and has no clue if he's even alive or not. And that's why she's a bit upset about him not telling his family where he is or where he's going, or even just to let them know that he's alive, because she herself knows how terrible that feels. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't have a kid just out somewhere in the world where I don't know if they're alive or not, but I really do feel for both Catherine Keener and Marcia Gay Harden, who plays his actual mother, who don't know where their sons are, don't know whether they're alive or not. Just like, they raised you and gave you a lot, and you can't even drop a line just to say, hey, not dead, I'll call you in 6 months or whatever. Just like, you're very idealistic, but that's not what reality is. And the film's okay, but I'm worried about people who would watch it and then be like, I should go off and do that. I'm like, yeah, but he died. You recognize that, right? Like, he died unnecessarily, didn't need to, from his own stupidity, foolishness, whatever. So overall, I can see why people really like this film. It has a great cast in it. The jumping back and forth from time thing kind of throws me off. Not so much because I can tell when we're in Alaska, and therefore I can tell when all the non-Alaska things are happening, but it's the way the non-Alaska things tie together that throws me off, because they have like chapter names and they're like birth and manhood and adolescence or something. I'm always confused when we get back from Alaska, back to the non-Alaska places, how long it's been since the last non-Alaska place. It's like, has it been a few weeks? Has it been a few months? We sometimes get a time frame where it's like, oh, and now we're in September of, 2000 or 2001. I'm like, okay, but I can't remember where we were the last time. So my sense of time framing here, this all happened within a 2-year period, but I'm not sure where we are right now in that 2-year period, especially in reference to where we were 20 minutes ago or whatever. Since I already knew going into this, because this was based off a true story and pretty much everyone knew that, he ended up dead on a bus. I'm like, so I know this is not going to end well. Why am I going to watch this film? For the cast, I guess, if nothing else. The cast is really pretty good. This is written and directed by Sean Penn. It's actually pretty decently directed. I don't know that I've ever seen anything else if Sean Penn has directed anything else, but this was not bad. So I would say not a bad film to watch, but not one to romanticize either. And on that note, we're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.